For centuries, science called them myth, primitive fears, fossil misidentification, mass hysteria. Until now, every major civilization on Earth independently documented the same animal: China, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Britain, the Americas, same wingspan, same fire, same anatomy. Across at least 4,000 years of recorded history, zero contact with each other. Then, aeronautical engineers ran the biomechanics. When the largest flying creatures in Earth's history landed, their flight apparatus folded completely into their forelimbs. Their ground silhouette wasn't a bird. It wasn't a lizard. It was exactly what every ancient eyewitness drew. On every cave wall, every temple, every scroll. Across every continent independently 3,000 years before any of this, the Bible named it. Original Hebrew Tannin, recorded 26 times. Not as allegory, not as symbol, as natural history. Today, using the world's leading aeronautical databases and original Hebrew scripture, we prove what every ancient eyewitness already knew. The Bible didn't record a myth. It recorded a wildlife encounter.
Hello there.
I'm Michael, your digital Morpheus, Navy nuclear and electrical engineer, son of a NASA Langley scientist. And today I'm running the actual biomechanics on the most suppressed question in natural history. Let's decode it. There is a question that mainstream science has never answered. Not because they couldn't find it, because finding it would change everything they thought they knew. Here it is. More than 80 independent cultures across every inhabited continent on Earth, each one separated by oceans, mountain ranges, and thousands of years, all left behind records of the exact same creature. Not a similar creature, the same creature. Same wingspan, same four-legged stance, same association with fire and water. Same anatomical features, independent of each other. Always. The Mesopotamians documented it in the Enuma Elish, one of the oldest written records on Earth, with cuneiform writing dating to approximately 3100 BCE, though this specific text was composed later, around 1300 BCE. They called it Tiamat, a winged, reptilian, physical creature. In the oldest cuneiform tablets held by the British Museum, the word Tiamat didn't start as a fable. It was recorded in practical, non-mythological, everyday documents. The ancient Egyptians, completely isolated across the Sahara, documented the same creature in their hieroglyphic wildlife records. Wings, scales, quadrupedal. The Chinese Shang dynasty, separated from the Middle East by the entire Eurasian continent, recorded imperial dragons, beginning around 1600 BCE. Same wingspan, same scales, same anatomy. The British Isles, the Maya, the Americas, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, every one of them. The same creature. Now I know what modern databases say. They flag these accounts as myth. But here's what those databases don't tell you. The founding naturalists who originally built the British Museum collection did not dismiss the physical evidence behind these legends. Where modern archives see folklore, the original scientists classified the physical remains as a non-mythological reality, real biological beasts that walked and flew. So before we dismiss the ancient witnesses, let's look at what the original scientists actually dug up. Now, considering this context, the British Museum catalog documents Greco-Roman, Mesopotamian, and Nilotic mosaics depicting physical, non-mythological reptilian creatures. The key word is non-mythological. These were not gods. These were not symbols. These were animals. So, here is the question that drives this entire investigation. What is the statistical probability that more than 80 independent civilizations across 4,000 years of recorded history all separately invented the same false creature that happens to match a verified biomechanical profile documented in peer-reviewed journals. That probability is not low. That probability is essentially zero. Something was there, and the evidence is about to tell us exactly what it was. Let's set aside the art. Let's set aside the scripture. Let's set aside every legend ever written. And let's look at the data. Pterosaur fossils have been recovered from every major continent on Earth. They are real, documented, peer-reviewed physical evidence of large flying reptiles that once dominated the skies of this planet. The mainstream position is clear. Pterosaurs went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period. That position is not disputed here. What is disputed, based entirely on peer-reviewed evidence, is what these creatures looked like when they were alive, and specifically, what they looked like when they landed. Researchers published a landmark study in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B, one of the most prestigious scientific journals on Earth. The study documented the first confirmed pterosaur landing trackway ever recorded in stone. This was not a theory. This was physical evidence pressed into rock. Footprints from a landed pterosaur. The finding changed everything. The trackway proved beyond dispute that large-winged pterosaurs landed on all four limbs, not two, four. They were not awkward bipeds. They were powerful terrestrial quadrupeds, fully capable of walking, stalking, and moving across open ground on four limbs. A second peer-reviewed study in the National Institutes of Health database documented something even more remarkable. The pterosaur flight membrane attached directly to the ankle bones. Not the shoulder, not the back, the ankle. This is critical, because when the pterosaur folded its wings for terrestrial movement, the entire flight apparatus collapsed into its forelimbs. The wings became part of the legs, the membrane tucked cleanly against the body. A third study published in Science Direct documented the exact wing morphology folding mechanism, the structural biology of how this occurred at the skeletal level. The result? A landed walking pterosaur presented a specific ground silhouette. Four legs, long neck, wings folded into the forearms, a pointed tail. A sail-like crest in many species. We'll return to that silhouette, because every ancient eyewitness drew it. I am Michael David. I have a background in nuclear and electrical engineering with the Nimitz-class aircraft carriers. My father worked at NASA Langley from the Apollo 13 era onward. I am telling you this because what comes next is not theology. What comes next is structural mechanics. And this is the chapter that no traditional paleontology channel on YouTube can build, because they don't have this background. When an aeronautical engineer looks at a pterosaur wing, they don't see a fossil. They see a load-bearing system, a structural mechanism, a biological machine that had to obey the same laws of physics that govern every aircraft ever constructed. Here is what the engineering data shows. The pterosaur wing membrane attached from the shoulder to the fourth elongated finger and, critically, down to the ankle. This is documented in the PMC database and in the Journal of Experimental Biology. The ankle attachment created a continuous tensioned surface across the entire wingspan. Think of a hang glider. The tension in the sail is what generates lift. The pterosaur membrane operated on the same physical principle. Here's the structural implication that changes everything. When a pterosaur stalled and initiated its landing sequence, The membrane could not remain extended. Extended membranes create drag. Every engineer understands this. The creature had to fold the system. The Science Direct study documents the folding mechanism precisely. The fourth finger, the structural spar of the wing, rotated inward toward the body. The membrane followed. The ankle connection point pulled the lower membrane tight against the hind limb. The entire flight apparatus compressed against the body and forearms. I want you to visualize this. What remained standing on the ground was not a bird. It was not a lizard. It was a four-limbed, long-necked, crested, scaled, winged creature, wings folded into its forearms, standing upright as a terrestrial quadruped. Hold that silhouette in your mind, because in the next chapter, I'm going to show you what ancient artists across 6 continents, separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles, carved into temple stone, pressed into cave walls, and painted onto ancient scrolls. They didn't imagine it. They drew from memory. Every piece of evidence we've assembled, the biomechanical data, the Royal Society trackway, the engineering silhouette analysis, has existed only in modern peer-reviewed journals. Now we go back in time, and we find that the ancient world already knew. The first artifact is the most famous and the most contested, Angkor Wat, the temple complex at Ta Prohm in Cambodia, built in the 12th century CE. Among its thousands of stone carvings, researchers identified what appears to be a creature with dorsal plates along its back, a long neck, and a heavy body. A creature that should not be there. The carving became a flashpoint in the origins debate. Critics, including an academic paper from Eckerd College, argue that what looks like dorsal plates may be stylized lotus petals, a common decorative motif throughout the temple complex. This is a legitimate counter-argument. It deserves to be heard honestly. But here's the critical point. The Angkor Wat debate does not collapse this investigation. Even if you remove it entirely, 5 other independent civilization records remain standing. The case does not rest on a single stone carving. It rests on Convergence. The second artifact, Kachina Bridge in Natural Bridges, National Monument, Utah. A petroglyph carved by ancestral Puebloan people, depicting what some researchers identify as a sauropod dinosaur. The proportions of the long neck, massive body, and sweeping tail consistent with no known modern animal. The mainstream counter-argument categorizes it as a stylized bird or serpent. Noted. This is treated as supporting evidence, not primary. Third, the Ica stones of Peru. Ancient burial stones depicting creatures with anatomical features not scientifically described until the modern era. Important caveat: the provenance of some stones is disputed by researchers who believe certain examples may be more recent. So, it is mentioned with caution. This is not the lead evidence. It belongs alongside stronger artifacts, not in front of them. The fourth category is the most solid and the least discussed. The British Museum catalog explicitly documents Greco-Roman, Mesopotamian, and Nilotic mosaics, depicting physical, non-mythological, reptilian creatures. Not symbolic, not divine. The catalog's own classification is the admission. These were documented as real animals. Now take the biomechanical ground silhouette from Chapter 4, the folded wing quadruped, the long neck, the crested profile. Compare it to each of these artifacts across 6 civilizations. No single artifact needs to be uncontested. The Convergence does the work, and the convergence is statistically impossible to explain any other way. Before modern aeronautical engineers ran the biomechanics, before the Royal Society published the landing trackway study, before any peer-reviewed journal documented the wingfold mechanism, a man named Job and God described this creature in detail. 3,000 years before any of that science existed. The Hebrew word is tannin, transliterated as tannin. Strong's number H8577. According to the Blue Letter Bible, WLC, Hebrew text, the authoritative lexical database for biblical Hebrew. This word appears exactly 26 times across the Hebrew scriptures, in 26 distinct verses. Not 28, not 30, 26, verifiable, citable, exact. And in the book of Job, chapter 41, the biblical text devotes an entire chapter to describing this creature in language that reads not as poetry, not as metaphor, but as a naturalist's field report. Let the text speak for itself. Job 41, verse 18. Its sneezes flash forth light, and its eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Bioluminescence, documented in the text, documented in modern Ropen eyewitness accounts, 3,000 years apart. Job 41, verse 19. Out of its mouth go burning torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Job 41, verse 20. Out of its nostrils smoke goes forth, as from a boiling pot. Job 41, verse 21. Its breath sets coals ablaze, and a flame goes forth from its mouth. Now compare this to how the same biblical authors write about lions, eagles, horses, the same matter-of-fact naturalist tone, the same behavioral precision, the same anatomical specificity. Job 41 is not in a different literary category than Job 39, which describes the ostrich and the warhorse. It is in the same category. Natural history. Job 41, verse 15. Its back has rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. Interlocking scales. Structural. A biological shield. Job 41, verse 31. It makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron. Waterline behavior. Hydrodynamic mass. An animal large enough to visibly disturb open water. This creature was not a symbol. It was not a spiritual metaphor. The Hebrew text is describing wildlife in the same literary register used for every other creature in the natural world. And it matches the biomechanical profile we established in chapter 4 with a precision that should not be possible 3,000 years before the science existed to verify it. Leviathan is not the only creature Job describes. In chapter 40 of the same book, God introduces a second creature. The Hebrew word is Behemoth, and the physical description that follows is one of the most debated passages in biblical natural history. But the debate has a resolution, and it comes from the text itself. Job 40, verse 15, Behold now, Behemoth, which I made as well as you. It eats grass like an ox. It is herbivorous. It is enormous. It is presented as the pinnacle of God's creative power. Job 40, verse 17. It bends its tail like a cedar. The sinews of its thighs are knit together. Job 40, verse 18. Its bones are tubes of bronze. Its limbs are like bars of iron. Job 40, verse 23. If a river rages, it is not alarmed. It is confident, though the Jordan rushes to its mouth. Now apply a simple process of elimination. The hippopotamus. The hippopotamus has a tail approximately 14 to 20 inches long, thin, stub-like. It does not bend. It cannot be compared to a cedar tree under any honest interpretation of the text. The elephant. The elephant tail is similarly small, thin, short. The cedar of Lebanon could reach heights exceeding 100 feet. with a trunk base spanning several feet in diameter at its root. No elephant tail begins to satisfy that description. Every large modern mammal fails the cedar tail test. Every single one. There is one biological candidate whose tail anatomy satisfies this description: a large sauropod dinosaur, in the same family as Diplodocus or Brachiosaurus. A creature with a long, muscular, tapered, load-bearing tail that swept behind it like a counterweight. The tail of a sauropod is the only known biological structure with the mass, length, and curvature to justify a cedar comparison. The text did not invent this creature. The text described a creature the author had either seen firsthand or heard described by eyewitnesses who had. The cedar tail constraint eliminates every other candidate. What remains is what the text says it is. Let me be precise about something. This investigation is not anti-science. It is not a conspiracy theory. And there is no secret cabal suppressing dragon research in the basement of a government building somewhere. Here is the actual explanation for why this evidence has not entered mainstream scientific conversation, and it is far more mundane than a cover-up. Paleontology doesn't read theology. Theology doesn't read aeronautical engineering journals. Ancient history doesn't cross-reference biomechanics databases. The peer-reviewed evidence assembled in this video is publicly available. The Royal Society Trackway study is real and accessible to anyone. The PMC biomechanics data is publicly indexed. The Blue Letter Bible Hebrew lexicon is free online. The British Museum catalog is publicly searchable. None of this is hidden. All of it is siloed. The mainstream scientific consensus on dragon legends rests on one explanation: mass fossil misidentification. Ancient people found dinosaur bones. They didn't understand what they were looking at. They built mythology around the remains. The story spread. This argument is not dishonest. In some cases, it is probably true. But it cannot explain behavioral descriptions. Fossils don't breathe fire. Fossils don't have documented waterline behavior. Fossils don't carry livestock. Fossils don't appear in living eyewitness accounts spanning 4,000 years across every continent on Earth. The fossil misidentification argument accounts for the visual appearance of creatures in ancient art. It does not, and cannot, account for the behavioral documentation that exists alongside that art in the same ancient records. That is the gap. That is where this investigation lives. And beyond that gap is a deeper structural problem. The synthesis required to connect peer-reviewed aeronautical data to ancient Hebrew scripture, to British Museum archaeological records, to modern Papua New Guinea eyewitness testimony. No single academic discipline does that. Paleontology doesn't go there. Theology doesn't go there. Ancient history doesn't go there. Beyond the matrix steps into this gap, forging a uniquely rigorous synthesis of aeronautical science, ancient scripture, and modern testimony that has never been built until now. If pterosaurs and large reptiles coexisted with human civilization long enough to leave records across more than 80 cultures over 4,000 years, then at some point they intersected with the most significant event in biblical history: the flood. Genesis chapter 7 records that God commanded Noah to bring representatives of every kind of creature onto the ark. The Hebrew word is min, a broader biological category than the modern species classification. Not every species, every created kind. Answers in Genesis and multiple creation science researchers have documented juvenile pterosaur size data showing that young specimens of even the largest pterosaur species, including Quetzalcoatlus, which had an estimated adult wingspan approaching 35 feet, were born significantly smaller. Juveniles could have been transported. The engineering of that operation has been studied in detail, and the size data is real and cited. This is Framework 1. The Ark carried biological kinds, not adult specimens of every species. Representative juveniles. The Behemoth and Leviathan kinds could have had juvenile representatives that satisfied the physical constraints of the Ark's dimensions. But there is a second biblical framework that this investigation does not ignore. Genesis chapter 6 records one of the most contested passages in all of Scripture. The Nephilim, the Bene Elohim, the sons of God, who came down and took wives from among the daughters of men. The first book of Enoch, a text directly quoted in the New Testament epistle of Jude, expands this account in significant detail. The Watcher Angels, beings described as having corrupted the biological and genetic order of living things on earth before the flood. Some researchers, working from both the Genesis text and the Enoch record, propose that certain creatures in the ancient record may reflect biological corruption events, not natural continuation of created kinds. Something that existed outside the original created order. Something that required the flood as a corrective response. The text does not resolve this question cleanly, neither will this video. What this chapter does is ask the question the ancient record raises, and that mainstream science refuses to engage. Was Behemoth on the Ark, or was it something darker, something that the Genesis 6 corruption event produced? The answer belongs to you. Drop your position in the comments. This is the community engagement this channel exists to have. The chain of evidence does not end in ancient history. It extends into the 20th century. It is documented, and it belongs in this investigation. Papua New Guinea, the interior of one of the least explored island ecosystems on Earth. For generations, indigenous communities across multiple isolated regions in this island nation have reported the same creature. Large, flying, bioluminescent, with a long diamond-shaped tail, wings described as leathery and featherless, and a wingspan reported anywhere between 3 feet to Western retellings of 15 and 30 feet. They call it the Ropin. The name translates roughly to demon flyer, glowing flyer, or winged light in the local dialect. This is not folklore passed between cultures. American missionaries working in the interior of Papua New Guinea in the mid-20th century documented first-hand accounts from multiple independent indigenous communities separated by geography with no contact between them, giving structurally identical descriptions of the same creature. The descriptions matched. The accounts were consistent. The biological profile described aligned with known large pterosaur anatomy, including the bioluminescence, which has a documented biological mechanism observed in several living species today. Researchers and explorers, including expeditions documented by Answers in Genesis, have traveled to the region and collected direct testimony. The witnesses are credible. The accounts are independent. The convergence is the same convergence we see in ancient history, only in living memory. The chain does not stop in Papua New Guinea. In sub-Saharan Africa, specifically in Zambia and Zimbabwe, indigenous communities and Western explorers have reported a creature called the Kongamato, described as a large, reddish, leathery-winged flying creature with no feathers. When witnesses were shown silhouettes of modern birds alongside pterosaur reconstructions, they consistently identified the pterosaur, without prompting, without coaching. In the American Southwest, multiple historical accounts from the late 19th century describe large, leathery winged creatures, the most cited being an 1890 Tombstone, Arizona account. Some accounts are sensationalized. The pattern, however, persists across independent sources. Here is the question that closes this chapter. If pterosaurs survived long enough to be documented across more than 80 cultures, on every continent, over 4,000 years of recorded history, what is the evidence-based reason to believe they stopped existing in one form or another before the 20th century? There isn't one. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The ropin is the most current data point in a chain of evidence that stretches from the Book of Job to the jungles of Papua New Guinea. For centuries, these textual and historical threads remained disconnected. This investigation finally bridges the gap, unifying ancient accounts and modern sightings into a single framework. We started with an impossible question. More than 80 cultures, 4,000 years of recorded history, zero cultural contact, all independently documenting the same creature. We went to the peer-reviewed aeronautical data. We applied engineering analysis from a background in electrical engineering and nuclear Navy structural mechanics. We confirmed that the biomechanical ground profile of a landed pterosaur, wings folded into the forearms, four-limbed stance, crested profile, is a structural match for every major ancient depiction across 6 civilizations. We opened the Hebrew text. We found 26 precise references, not metaphors, not symbols, written as natural history in the same literary register used for lions and war horses. 3,000 years before the peer-reviewed science confirmed the biology, we followed Job's physical description of Behemoth through systematic elimination. Every modern animal candidate failed the cedar tail constraint. Only one biological profile satisfies the text, and that profile is a sauropod. We documented the ropin, the Congamato, the eyewitness accounts that extend the chain from ancient stone carvings to living human testimony in the 20th century. And we left a question open in Genesis 6 that this civilization has not yet answered and may not answer until the investigation goes deeper than this video can take it. So, here is the final verdict. The Bible didn't record a myth. It recorded wildlife encounters, documented by people who were present, in the same matter-of-fact, naturalist tone used for every other creature in the natural world. The ancient eyewitnesses were right. The aeronautical engineers confirmed it. The Hebrew lexicon preserved it. The ropin reminds us the investigation is not over. The question was never whether dragons were real. The question was whether we were willing to look at all the data. Across every discipline, every continent, every century, and follow it to where it actually leads. And today, you looked. If this investigation moved you, consider joining the Matrix community on Patreon as a member. Your support is what makes the next investigation possible. For those who want to go even deeper, the Decoder Vault is in the description, and also Patreon. I personally recommend and endorse bookshop.org's curated Matrix library, over 100 books personally organized by topic, and Logos Bible software, where you can study the original Hebrew and Greek texts yourself. Logos is offering 60 days free. through my exclusive link. All links are below. If this investigation helped you see things differently, share it with someone who needs it. I'm Michael, your digital Morpheus, and the truth doesn't need to be defended, just excavated. I'll see you in the next one.
My name is Michael Hepner. This is Beyond the Matrix, and the investigation never stops. Ready to dive deeper beyond the Matrix? Watch the next video here to see just how deep the rabbit hole truly goes. And since you've made it this far in our journey, be sure to share your experience in the Matrix community.